I hereby call to order this meeting of the school board. Mrs. Hutchison, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Crabtree? Here. Mr. Gambiani?
Here.
Mrs. Intihar?
Here.
Mr. Matheson?
Here.
Mr. Paulson?
Here.
Mrs. Coghill is absent. Mr. Broman?
Here. Mr. Paulson, will you please lead us in the pledge of
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we proceed through the agenda tonight, are there any modifications to the agenda? Hearing none, we'll move to public comments. See that we have two signed up for public comments. The opportunity to speak to the board is provided for members of the public who have a question or comment on an agenda item. The board appreciates hearing from stakeholders and values your thoughts and questions. The board strives to make the best decisions for the district, and public input in a variety of venues is very helpful. The board must protect the civility and decorum of this meeting. Please be respectful for the duties of the board and the democratic process in your comments tonight. Please use the microphone, state your name, and whether you are a resident of the district, and address your comments to the board. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Please be factual and courteous, and do not include statements that are personally disrespectful or condescending to members of the board or staff. If you feel your matter needs to be discussed in more detail, please attend the board's chance to chat or present your comments to us in writing. The first person I have signed up is Mrs. Jan Shaw.
Mic's turned on. Very good. I'm Jan Shaw. I am a resident of the district. Talking a little bit about a couple things. One, I put in a FOIA. It's on your FOIA report. Secondly, I noticed you've got accounts payable on there, list of the checkbooks, and we've got some budget stuff. Let's start with the Illinois Constitution here. Let's see if I can do this. Section 1, general comments. Public funds, property or credit shall be used only for public purposes. I want you to keep that in mind. The state, units of local government, and school districts shall incur obligations for payments to be made payment for public funds only as authorized by law or statute. So things have to be authorized, they have to be for public purpose. Number 2, section 1010 of, chapter 122, it has to do with school boards being created. One of the things it says in there is that school board members are to work without compensation, okay? Which means they're not allowed to buy you goodies at taxpayer dollars. Not allowed to give you things that cost money, because that could be considered compensation. Anyway, I put in a FOIA and I asked for everything having to do with celebrations that have been done in the district in the last 3 years. I got 9 PDF files that varied from 30 to 80 pages each. That's a lot of parties and receptions. Okay, a lot of gifts, a lot of things for folks just to say good job or whatever, who knows. Most of the items didn't have any indication of what they were actually for. It was just a bill that sheet cake was picked up, or plates, napkins, and forks, or decorations. Anyway, adding these up, for the year 2013 to 14, we spent $19,000 on this stuff. 2014 to 2015, $17,856. 2015 to 16, $28,000. Did I get that right? Yeah. And there's $23 already this year, in July. No big deal. Grand total over 3 years was $65,730 spent on things that were classified as celebrations. Okay, let's see if we can break some of this up. There was a retirement dinner, 2014. You had 104 guests, 52 retirees were invited. They didn't all attend. Cost $4,140 at Cantini. That's for their fees. In 2015, we had 40 retirees, 88 guests went to the dinner, $3,234. 2016, You had 82 retirees, 167 attended the dinner. 3,000, oh, that's wrong. It was 6,000 something. I got the wrong figure on this chart. Anyway, when we look at this stuff, the fact that you had 80 people retire last year, they should have been replaced. They're top end salary people usually that are retiring. You hire with new folks who are near the bottom. What happened to the windfall? There should have been some money left over from the fact that we've got people, more new teachers as opposed to existing older teachers. Let's see what other data we got on here. 10,000 for clocks for retirees. 17,000 for things that retirees, or might have even been service anniversaries, I'm not positive which. Everybody got to order something out of a catalog called Eagle Awards. In 2014, $6,957. They ordered 160 5x7 Mylar magnetic frames with some certificates to go in them. $43 per frame, 160 frames. What was that for? No idea. Dollar Tree, we had $23 in frame. That's a much better price. Grand total on this stuff, $35,000 on that category. Let's see. Generally speaking, let's see what we got on these different categories here. Flowers, foods, and gifts, 1,397. Those are things like, oh, let's see, let's just give you a couple printouts here. Here's a copy of one of the dinners. You can pass that around. This one here, the 50 clocks, that was for 50 of them. There were more. They went in several different orders. I only printed one page. Oh, this is a really good one. Edible Delights, plus a Mylar balloon that says, "It's a boy." Ordered by Erica Loacno for Erica Loacno. Mariano's, this one's from last month. June 8th, I can't read it without my magnifier. I think that lines up with the sheet cake you have from Mary Lou Sender. Mary Lou Sender's send-off had $137 for a cake. Maybe something else on there too, it doesn't say. Anyway, when I look at this stuff, and then I start comparing it to our accounts payable, and what we're finding is none of this shows up in the accounts payable. Is there any way the board members would have known this was going on? Your accounts payable has lists of who they're paid to, the checks are made out to. It does sometimes include staff names. For the ones with staff names, it doesn't indicate what the item was for. Even on these where they have receipts, it's a cake. What were we celebrating? How is the board supposed to know what we're spending money on if there's no accounting for these things that are being reimbursed to teachers? If things go on a P card or credit card that teachers or staff are doing, does that show up in the accounts payable, the monthly checkbook anywhere? Any way they would know that? I couldn't find it. Okay, so there's things you need to do. One is to make sure we're doing stuff better. And the second thing, which is really far more important, is for the board to set a policy as to what our PR lady, which I'm beginning to think stands for parties and receptions. You know, what are we spending our money on? Does it have a public purpose? If there's no public purpose, we shouldn't be spending the money. Retirement gifts, breakfasts, dinners, retirement honors teas, and multiple gifts to people who are retiring is crazy. They're already very well paid. They're gonna get a very nice pension. And on top of it, we're doing this. And then I hear from my friends who have kids at school that not only are they asking parents to send in boxes of Kleenex at the beginning of the year, but toward the end of the year, teachers are sometimes asking people to send in things like dry erase markers because they don't have the school supplies. And I hear rumors that we're gonna be asking for another referendum. Until you guys start spending the money wisely, nobody's gonna give you any more money. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Harold Wants. Harold?
I'll keep mine much shorter. My name is Harold Wants. I live here in the district. I just want to say one thing. On the personnel report in the past, there used to be salaries for the administrators and the teachers, and it was taken off. I'd like to see that put back on so the public can see what's going on regarding the people we're hiring for transparency purposes. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lott. Next item on the agenda is the superintendent report. Dr. Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Broman. I've got just a couple of things that I wanted to share with the board this evening under my report, and we're actually going to tag team a couple of these updates, and that Faith and Joanne are going to help me with two of them. One is in your green folder. There is an updated copy of the 2015-16 summary of all donations to the district. You might remember at the beginning of the year, at the request of the board, we wanted to kind of keep track of some of those donations that you're approving throughout the year, and so the document looks like this. It's about a 3-page document, and again, I am 100% certain that this does not capture every donation that's come into the district, and that we haven't captured necessarily the in-kind donations or some of the other, kind and generous gifts that have been given to the district. But what the board can see over that 12-month period is about a little over $325,000 in donations from external sources. That includes foundations, now the Student Excellence Foundation, the Page Community Foundations, the donations from PTAs, as well as individuals throughout the year. So again, I just think it's a nice summary and capture, and certainly with Diana's help, we'll continue to do that through this next year as well, just kind of log them as you're approving them. So I wanted to point that out. The second thing that I did want to mention is that in the personnel report this evening, the board will be approving the hire of 2 new administrators into the district. One is out in the audience, Lauren Humphreys-Wade. Lauren is going to be the new assistant principal at Edison Middle School this year, and then also Dan Kornthauer is being approved as the new director of high school instruction. Dan is currently the social studies department chair at Wheaton North, and is going to be coming over to join Faith's department as the director of high school instruction. Dan's not here with us this evening, but again, very, very excited about that. Kind of keeping in that vein, I met with Christy Kuntz yesterday to just get an update on where we are in the hiring process. I know that's something the board certainly was very cognizant of, with the number of retirements, replacements we had this year. We are down to just 3 full-time positions, 2 part-time certified positions left to hire. We've already processed 107 new hires through the summer months. Also got a couple of leave positions that are being covered, and then turning the attention now to some of the support staff, instructional assistants that still need to be hired. But again, I think that's great news in terms of where we are at this point in the summer, that just a couple of positions left. And again, what I have heard certainly anecdotally from building principals is that they were very pleased with the hiring pools that were available to us this year. So that's good news.
Dr. Schuler?
Yeah.
With respect to that, could you please address the citizen comment on the savings from the retired people to the new hires? Because I think there's a little bit of a misconception out there about where that difference should show up.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, so I guess a couple things to note on that. Certainly, as you look at the budget, and I think Bill will cover a portion of this in the budget presentation this evening. What you're going to see in terms of that salary number is a salary number that's pretty flat from the previous year. Certainly there was money that went back into increases across the board, both on salary schedule, administrative, and non-certified staff, and so that's kept really that budget number flat. Obviously, those individuals, we didn't cut positions this past year, so those individuals were replaced with folks that have come in at varying points on the salary schedule, but it's the combination of those replacements and increases, as well as I do want to point out that as we were working through the math coaches and some of those positions, those were not all new dollars, but some of them are new salary dollars. So they were reductions elsewhere in the budget that now appear as salary with some of those positions that we've we've hired, and those would be rolled into salary
Right.
numbers as well.
But I wanted to clarify that I don't expect that the difference would have been seen in any historical information that we have to date, because those new positions are in 16, 17.
Would be in next year's budget.
Is when the replacements come in, but 15, 16, we still have the retired teachers to the end of that budget year, June 30th.
Yesterday, I think sent forwarded on to the board an update from the state regarding the universal college assessment that's going to be given next year. We went from, I think, the last board meeting where we were concerned about a state budget at all. There is a stopgap budget that was put in place, both for education and some of the other state services, and so included in that budget now is state payment of a universal college entrance exam that will be SAT this year, not ACT, as we've been used to, and so I asked Faith just to kind of give a quick update on the process that we're going to go through and kind of so just for clarification, we have no choice in terms of administering SAT. That will be a state requirement that we administer that on a school day to all high school juniors. It is the state assessment next year at the high school level, no more park at all at the high school level, just SAT. So we don't have any choice on that. What we have some choice around, especially now as we talk about budget, is what we want to do about ACT. That was something we did fund in last year's budget in the year that the state didn't fund it. So if you want to just kind of give a quick update on what we're doing with that.
Sure. As Dr. Schiller said prior to the announcement this week, the high school state assessment was park, and districts could have choice in whether we were going to be doing ACT or SAT, and we didn't know whether anything would be funded. As of the announcement from our state superintendent this week, the high school state assessment is no longer park. It's going to be SAT, and it's mandated everybody, and it is also funded. So it's a funded mandate of what we're going to be doing. So that's causing us to rethink what we had originally thought, because we would have choice in that, and our students were also having to take park on top of that. So we have a meeting tomorrow with the high school principals, assistant principals, Dr. Schuler, Julio, myself, and then we're going to figure out what all that means for our students. We want to be cognizant of the fact that a lot of parents have already enrolled students in ACT prep and what all that we're going to be like, but also be cognizant of how much instructional time do we want to give to 2 mandated college exams. So we have some thinking to do on that, and I'm sure as we work through that, we're going to give you updates. We want to get this information out to parents as soon as possible about what would be, but the state gave us very little advance time to be able to think and plan about that, and we want to make sure that our principals of our high schools are included in that conversation and that decision.
Yeah, Faith, this question may be premature since you're having a meeting tomorrow, but if we need to have the kids take the SAT test, that's a mandate. If we should drop the ACT, is there any way to correlate the results for trending purposes from the ACT exams that have been taken in the past to the SAT that will be taken this spring?
Really good question, and no, the test is a different type of a test. We will not be able to say, just because you had this many students proficient on the ACT, that you would project. We've yet to see what those differences, and there are differences in the type of testing with, like for example, the ACT and science components in that. We're still going to be taking a state science assessment. There are different components in how reading and writing is scored on these tests. So trend data from one test to another will not be useful.
I have a question. Is it
No, I don't want to.
the SAT contract? It's just 3 years. Am I right in saying that? So 3 years. So we could lose all of our ACT data, switch to SAT, do that for 3 years, and the state could go back to ACT again. Correct?
That's a possibility. They also can stay with SAT, and we have to give the SAT because it's now not just the option of what high schools want to give, it is the state mandated assessment.
Are the colleges and universities, are they accepting, historically the ACT has been the Midwest unit of measure for testing. Are they now moving to the ACT? I guess it's kind of an indirect budget question, because this year we funded the ACT program. We're trying to avoid too much testing. Do we want to continue to fund that? And right off the bat, we know that if it's optional, we won't get as many results taking the test. So I guess the fundamental question is, as we move through the budget, what do we think about?
Yeah, colleges will accept SAT. I mean, bottom line, especially if and actually Illinois is not alone in this. There were several other Midwestern states in similar spots that have migrated to SAT as their universal entrance exam, and so, I mean, as far as a student having a score that will meet a college entrance requirement, it's a different test, but colleges will accept SAT. That won't be an issue.
What are our thoughts on, do we think it's appropriate to continue funding? My initial reaction is no, because I think it's not going to, if it becomes, unless we pay for it, but even then I don't know if everyone takes it still. And, if it's an optional test, we won't get comparable results anyway. So.
And I think as Faith just managed, we'll have a better sense of that after tomorrow. I don't want to answer that question publicly, candidly, Jim, without making sure that all the people that are going to have an opinion on that and have some insight into that decision are at least around the table tomorrow. I think it would be short-sighted of us to just make that decision right now without engaging our high schools in that discussion, but we're meeting with them tomorrow.
One more quick question. Faith, I know at the elementary level and the middle school level, we have our local assessments in place. So, as we've gone from PARC and ACT and now SAT, and do we have measures other than, say, finals, unless we have common finals within both high school, do we have measures in place then at the high school level that we can still kind of keep an eye on how things are doing as we keep switching around to different tests before we get some decent trend data?
They're not district-wide assessments across the high schools to be able to do that piece of it. We do have, as just with the ACT, there are several different types of tests like Explore and Plan that are given some indication of what that were going to be. We had already, prior to this decision from the state, because we knew they were going to SAT, talk at the middle school level and possibly at the freshman level about what we need to do to prepare the students for SAT that's coming up, and those measurements can be used, but they'll be different measurements. So trend data wouldn't be, as possible, because one was prepping for the ACT and one is prepping for the SAT. But we are wanting to have multiple indicators of where we're going on that piece, so we can use one of those at the high school level to be able to do that.
That brings up another question. Right now we have, is it the Plan or the Explorer that the kids take in 8th grade? Is it 8th grade, right? And we look for the difference in score between that and the ACT to see the growth.
Correct.
Is there a similar test for the SAT for that? Okay, good.
There is, and Julio and I met with the middle school principals yesterday, on getting that in line for our middle school, so we begin to have that data as it would be predicting what the SAT scores would be.
So just so I can understand here, so if there's a lot of juniors probably taking some practice exams this summer, or they're getting ready to take those on the ACT, what should they take it or not? I mean, what if the SAT is the de facto? We all love standardized exams, right? What would be your advice?
Well, I'll be giving quite a bit of advice after I meet with principals tomorrow to know how much of what we are doing. My own son, who doesn't attend this district, is also in the same age category. We're going to do both. We're going to take SAT at school and we're going to take ACT outside of there to see what that is. But I need to talk with high school principals about what types of guidance that we can give, or what different options we might be able to provide here to make that an easier choice, or what that would look like. So do want to give advice to parents and options of that, but I don't have that until we collectively meet with high school principals tomorrow.
Jim, I think that's it for the report.
A couple questions, Dr.
For the
Schuler.
record, I like the discussion. I wasn't suggesting that.
Yeah, you completed your report.
Yes, I did.
A couple questions. 2016-17 was to be the school year in which para would be implemented in the school districts. Could you give us just a brief report on how it's being implemented? And the other question I had, and Chris raised this with me and I didn't know the answer. For those of us who've been on the board for a while, do we have to take a para course of some sort to be certified as new board members are, I guess?
And so, two pieces. One, para is in existence. The new element to para going into place this year is the student growth measure tied into teacher evaluation. So we do have a plan. We've been working with the joint committee on rolling out, piloting that plan over the last year. What I would suggest, rather than covering it tonight, is I'd like to have Dr. Rammer provide an oral report to the board at your August meeting on what that plan looks like. As far as the board piece, you are only required to have undergone training in that portion of para at the point in which you might be making a release decision about a teacher under para. So that's nothing to be concerned about like in the next month before the start of the year. That's something we'll need to be concerned about as we begin to look out at that sequence as it might tie to any personnel action underneath that. But it kind of like you did with the Senate Bill 100 piece, there will be a required training for the board before you actually were to take any action under that new teacher student growth piece.
Great.
I have one other question on this. This is really a different topic, but the new state temporary budget, or whatever the thing is it says that we're going to get more state funding to the full level on state aid that we have historically gotten 89% on, correct? And then I recall recently there was discussion about blending some of the special needs costs into the state aid number. Is that not part of this either? Okay.
I'll let Bill cover that when he gets to the tentative budget presentation.
Any other questions for Dr. Schuler? If not, we'll move to consent agenda, which is my favorite part of the agenda. The items under the consent agenda are as follows. Number 1, acceptance of gifts from Jefferson Early Childhood Center PTA. 2, acceptance of gifts from Lowell PTA. 3, acceptance of gifts from Pleasant Hill PTA. 4, acceptance of gifts from Moosebrook PTA. 5, approval to post policy 4.32, disclosure for public review and comment. 6, approval to post revised policy 7.60, student residency for public review and comment. 7, approval of novels for the elementary PACE program. 8, approval of materials for high school English course, modern and contemporary literature. 9, approval of high school information technology 1 textbook. 10, appointment of the athletic emergency action plans for the middle and high schools. 11, approval to renew the agreement with the YMCA Safe and Sound program. 12, approval of cold beverage contract services. 13, approval of print shop paper bid. 14, approval of zero graphic bond paper bid. 15, approval of open previously closed minutes. 16, approval of the resolution authorizing transfer of monies from Operation and Maintenance Fund to Capital Projects Fund. 17, approval of the IASB annual dues. 18, approval of 2016-17 LUDA membership dues. 19, approval of NSBA dues for the 2016-17 school year. 20, approval of bills payable and payroll. 21, approval of minutes June 8, 2016 open and closed, and approval to destroy recordings of closed sessions prior to February 2015 as allowable by law. And 22, approval of personnel report to include employment, resignation, retirement, and leave of absence of administrative, certified, classified, and non-union staff. Are there any item board members want removed from the consent agenda? Hearing none. Dr. Schuler?
No additional information.
Are there any questions or comments from board members with respect to the consent agenda?
You know what, and I just want to circle back. I did not, as I was going through, notice any public comment on the novels, either for the literature or the gifted. So we're good with that?
That is
Because I thought those were fabulous lists, and I mentioned it at the last meeting when they were posted, but I wanted to, I don't know why.
You are correct, there were no comments.
Any other comments or thoughts?
I have a couple questions. On the YMCA program, is that now then a neutral cost to us? Is it a coyote?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry to get distracted.
Oh, here it is.
No, it's just, it caught my eye, I gotta watch out for those things. Sorry.
There he is. He'll talk.
That was a little distracting, wasn't it? No, the YMCA program. We know the YMCA now conducts that. They charge a cost for. We're neutral on that. Then other than indirect costs like utilities or whatever might be consumed. Is it? And that's why we shifted it, correct, to the YMCA.
Yeah, we shifted at 2 buildings that were having a difficult time running a balanced program within house. So yes, that's neutral to us in terms of cost of those 2 buildings.
That's a great community involvement. There was a technology information textbook that it was like $12,000. How many students are enrolled in that, out of curiosity?
I'd have to look that up to get back to you on the actual enrollment of those 2 of the classes from there.
I'd like to know that just from a
Okay.
cost per point of view. And the other one, on the transfer, that's a permanent transfer of monies, correct? And that, therefore, and that occurred in 2016-17, so that will not affect our fund balance calculation as of June 30th, 16. Is that correct? Okay. And one other item, I'm gonna ask this question on behalf of Mr. Lonks, and that would be, I'd love to see the posted budget show comparative actual to the prior year. I think we're moving in that direction anyway. Is that something?
Generally, that information is shared with the Finance Committee right after the tentative budget is posted, then it's provided to the full board at the August meeting when we have the public hearing.
I'd like to talk about number 19, approval of the NSBA dues for the 2016 school year, 16-17 school year. I know we're also approving dues for the Illinois State Board, the Illinois Association of School Boards. I know we're extremely active in that. All of us actually participate in multiple events throughout the year. LUDA, I know we get, Dr. Schuler is very active in that. We get regular updates. My question about the National School Board Association is I'm not saying I don't feel we should be a part of it. I'd like to know how we utilize that membership to justify the cost, the cost of it. And I know we were very active in the past, and I'm going to ask senior board members, it doesn't have to be tonight. I think we can, if I went through the survey today for our August meeting, and on there is what our opportunities and that we would like to do as a board. Maybe we talk about it then, but if we're not, I'd like just to know how we are utilizing that membership to justify the cost that we have and how we've used it in the past. Brad, I think you attend sometimes as professionally. Maybe at the time you can share with us some of your experience. I would just like to know how we're going to be using that in the future to make sure that that's still something that we want to be a part of.
Yeah, and we have that self-governance, self-evaluation board meeting scheduled for August 25. So I think that's an area where we can talk about that specifically, but also opportunities for other professional development that we maybe want to cover.
No, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, I do attend professionally as part of my compensated job. Like I said, it's a totally different type of conference than the Illinois Associate, the IESB one downtown. Much broader perspective, much deeper networking opportunity within Illinois, as well as across other similar districts across the state. I don't get to go to as many summit sessions as I would normally do because I'm working at the same time. A lot of different types of sessions. I see the value to it. There's certainly a bigger cost because travel is included. We haven't done it as a board recently. There will be new boards seated next April, May, which would be immediately after that. It would be the NSBA conference. So attending the conference is worthwhile, a different perspective, different type of speakers, different types of sessions, much deeper and broader than we would get here locally in the Chicago conference. But I don't personally get to attend as much, but it's certainly there.
I've attended a lot, and we could talk about this at our session. I think we should. I agree with Brad. I think there's great value to belonging to the National Association, and I think that varies from time to time. I mean, when you have hot issues, and the association is very active lobbying for something that's an issue at the national level, I think it's very important to be there and to have our voice be heard. Right now, the national level is kind of taking a back seat to all of what's happening in Illinois. So I understand why the Illinois is kind of taking importance, but I still think we need to have a national presence. We're a large enough district that we need to have that. Also, one of the things that that we discovered, Chris and I, is that I get the ASBJ journal. And
I got it today.
Oh, you got it today? Okay, good. So you were signed up for it. It just hasn't come to you yet. But this is the first time she got it. I've been getting it, and I'm sure other board members have been getting it for a long time. So I'm glad to know that we have those bases covered, that everyone, as part of our membership on the board, is getting that journal. So, I mean, I'm in favor of paying those dues and of making better use of the NSBA for our purposes. And in fact, as part of the public meeting, I will say that the last convention I went to, I got a lot of information that I provided to Dr. Schuler about the Community or Citizens Advisory Council, about how a district in another state had done it and how important, and I think some of that was filtered into that. So there are a lot of different things that go on in different states that are, we could be very myopic and look just inward, and we could look just in Illinois, but I think that would be a disservice to our students to do that.
Any other questions or comments with respect to consent agenda item?
I have a follow-up on that one. I guess if we're going to pay that dues, I would like to make sure that we utilize it, particularly this year. And a magazine is a nice thing, but it may not. So I think we really, if we're going to continue to be part of that, we best use it. Whether again, there's an offset of cost and so on. But I think we need to focus on utilizing that more so than we may have in the past.
A good point, and I think we all agree with that, Jim. All right, hearing no other comments or questions with respect to consent agenda items, I will ask for a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Paulson.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Matheson. Mrs. Husterton, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mr. Matheson?
Yes.
Mrs. Crabtree?
Yes.
Mrs. Intihar?
Yes?
Mr. Gambiani?
Yes.
Mrs. Coghill?
Yes.
Mr. Broman?
Yes. The motion passes. And we need one more person to vote. Okay, here we go. All right. The next item on the agenda is action item. It's the approval to post the 2016-17 tentative budget and set the public hearing on the 2016-17 budget. Dr. Schuler?
Yeah, so as Mr. Farley is getting situated at the podium, just want to remind the board that this is not the start of budget conversation. Obviously, been having them throughout the spring as we've looked at priorities for the the fiscal year that we're now entering. We had a discussion in June where Mr. Farley kind of laid out the story behind the budget and is here tonight to present to you the tentative budget that we would be voting tonight to put on display and to set a public hearing around. So, Mr. Farley?
Thank you, Dr. Schuler. As Jeff mentioned, budget process goes on throughout the year, and part of that included the story of the budget, which we did at the last meeting. These are kind of the key dates, milestone dates along the process. Where we're at tonight is July 13th, and we're asking you to approve the posting of the tentative budget. We'll have a meeting next week, a Finance Committee meeting, as Mr. Matheson mentioned, talking about actuals. The fiscal year ended on June 30th, so we're in the process of closing out the prior fiscal year, and we'll bring the information so we can compare actuals to the budget and how we ended up, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. At August 17th, we have a public hearing on the budget. That will be here at the School Service Center. We're required to have the budget on display for at least 30 days for public review, and then we allow the public comment at the August 17th meeting. And then finally, at the September 14th meeting, we'll ask the board to approve the budget. It's required to be approved each year by the end of the first quarter, which is September 30th. So we won't be up against it quite as much as the state of Illinois was with their budget. As far as the posting process goes, a notice will be published in the local newspaper, the Daily Herald, tomorrow as well. The document and will be on display here at the School Service Center and all of the libraries within the district, as well as online. This presentation will be online as well, along with the posted budget. Quick look in the rearview mirror as far as last fiscal year. As I mentioned, it ended June 30th. And how we ended up, the board has their monthly financial report, so I'm sure some of you have taken a look at that and seen how we did. We did well. The budget we're asking you to post tonight is going to be the 7th consecutive balanced budget, with 5 of those 6 years coming in at a positive operating balance at the end of the year. In other words, our revenues exceeded expenditures. We had the 1 year a couple years ago where our health care costs came in more. But we're anticipating having another positive operating year, which is good, obviously. One item of note in the monthly reports, you'll notice we received a late categorical payment from last year from the state. That's in that cash number. The auditors picked that up in the audit that the board accepted back in November. We are still owed a quarterly payment. It's about $2.6 million. So we believe even with that, if that categorical payment doesn't come in, we'll still be real close to a balance, but we're hoping and anticipating that the state will make that payment here sometime in the next month or two, sometime hopefully by the end of August. Our auditors are starting to come in next week, so we'll have those folks in as well. But salaries came in pretty much on number, real close to what we anticipated. Benefits, I talked about we had a really unhealthy year a few years ago, and that had an impact. We had a very good health year this year, you'll see in the budget, and that's good news. I think it's, Mrs. Crabtree asked a question about substitutes, why we were down. The budget's going down a little bit. We had that healthy year on the benefit side, but we also had a healthy year with subs and teachers being out due to illness, so we've made some shifts there. So we are joining the NIHIP cooperative, which puts us in that more of a protected zone of avoiding those high spikes in benefits that do happen from time to time in healthcare. So we're looking forward to getting that process up and running. Tuition and outplacement is probably a key item that again is going up. You'll see is going up in the budget, and that's a cost that we obviously try and keep controls on, but the cost of sending students outplaced has gone up considerably in the number of students that are going outplaced. So that's an item as well to keep an eye on. Refinancing, the board's aware that we did the refi. Numbers came in great. Mr. Roman did a great job of explaining how well that came in, and that's to try and eliminate that slope. So as we move forward to this next year's budget, you'll see that the bond and interest fund is kind of spiked up because it's an in and out of that refi. And then finally, on fund balance, we anticipate with the positive operating balance, fund balances will go up. But we, as Mr. Matheson mentioned, we have that transfer for capital items. So we feel that moving that $1.5 million that we're going to be replenishing with the positive outcome this year as well. So that transfer again is included in this year's budget for summer projects that are going on right now. That Mr. Robinson is keeping a close eye on our roof projects, and we've got a project here at Whittier and Wheaton, Warrenville South. So those projects are in full gear right now. And that transfers to cover those costs. Just talk some real quick highlights about the overall budget. We found out in January the 0.7 CPI is going to impact obviously impacts this budget. We'll be levying for that increase. It's on the heels of 0.8. So obviously revenues in general have been very limited from the local side, tied into that CPI number, as well as all the unknowns that we deal with at the state level and reductions there. So again, as Mr. Matheson mentioned, the budget being approved down in Springfield somewhat. We're waiting for the dust to settle a little bit on that, but we'll see how that goes. Tax levy distributions, again, we're fortunate to live in DuPage County where the distributions are made, people pay their taxes on time, and we see those distributions coming in still strong. CPPRT, I want to just talk a little bit about this. We generally budget in the education. We have a minimum amount we have to put in the IMRF fund. We've increased it a little bit into the IMRF fund. There's the decrease of the ed fund. It's also worth noting again, and we've talked to the board about this in the past, that the Illinois Department of Revenue somehow overcalculated the CPPRT payments to all municipalities, school districts, park districts. Our overpayment was about $260,000. We're still waiting to get official word on how they're going to collect that back from all of us. We're here, it's going to start in January possibly, and over 3 payments need reduced. So we do have that overpayment that the state made that's being corrected here at some point, and we're taking that into account in the budget. We don't know what our actual number for this year will be yet. We're still waiting for estimates on that. Interest earnings continue to be considerably low. It's obviously well under 1%, so interest earnings have not recovered. There was some hope that they were going to start increasing slowly, but I'm thinking as we see what happened over in Great Britain, that seems to have slowed the talk about increasing interest rates, so interest earnings continue to stay pretty low. State funding, talked a little bit about the general state aid. That funding, every 1%, last year was 92% proration. Prior years had been 89%, so that 8% swing, it does benefit the school district. We had in the model and in this budget about $6.35 million of general state aid. The numbers we've seen, estimates put it up almost to $6.9 million, and that's a combination of that proration being pulled up, as well as the impact of poverty, the poverty grant money that they put into the general state aid formula as well. So that increase is not in this budget as it stands right now. We've got our projected number in there from earlier, and we're waiting to see where we land when all the dust settles. There's still been some, there's some school districts that have come out and said that the number that was in theirs was wrong. I think Yorkville had for a $4.5 million increase, and it turns out it was really 1.6. So we want to make sure that the state and ISB has done all their work. A lot of that numbers were predicated off estimates of enrollment back in February. We filed our reports, so we're waiting to hear what happens from the state level on that regard. Special ed, the categorical money staying somewhat flat. There are some variances. Obviously, our special ed tuition reimbursements going up as our costs go up. Obviously not at the rate that's going up, but we're seeing some increase there, and then some of the other ones are moving up and down. Bilingual, we're still not getting the full budgeted amount in bilingual, but we do get some carryover, so we've got that. Transportation's going up a little bit this year. Was actually, we received more revenue in transportation on the regular ed side than we anticipated, so we're holding that number flat with what we actually received or plan to receive. That's helping, as we know, with on the expenditure side. Performance contracting, the state, we had grant money associated with projects that we had done in the past. We're continuing to hold that number. They did not even though that money is supplied by the utility companies, that money was not allocated by the state because they didn't have a budget. So as soon as we found out that there was a state budget allocated, we got in touch with our partners at PSI to see where this is all going to flow with the state as far as them releasing the funds. So we're still hopeful that we'll receive that grant money and obviously look at future options if they're out there. Federal funding is staying pretty flat as well in the area of National School Lunch Title and IDEA. On the expenditure side, we had the teachers' contract increase and the lane movement included. Classified staff are at 1.5% per contract. Admins are at 0.8%, and then non-union, non-represented are at 1.5% increases. Benefits, I mentioned the healthcare switch to NIHIP, so that's in the process of going that we will start October 1st with that. So we still are operating under our current self-insured plan for the first 3 months of this budget, and then we switch over to NIHIP. So it's going to be a transition year for the benefits program. It's also the first year that we have the spousal surcharge, which was negotiated as part of the contract, where there's a cost to carry your spouse on the plan. TRS, this is the last year of ERO. We had per the contract we did we're ending ERO with this last fiscal year. The state did have ERO sunsetted, so there is no more ERO early retirement option program out there. It's sunsetted on June 30th. We also had the TRS Fed issue, which is still, as the board is aware, if any federal grants that we have and put salaries on there for certified staff, there's a juice number of over 30% that we have to pay out of that grant money for the TRS. I know there's still legislation that's been talked about trying to bring that number down, and I don't know if I haven't heard anything lately on that. And then finally, the state on behalf payment. When we file the final document with the state budget, we do put that state on behalf number in there, which is the amount the state contributes to TRS on behalf of the district. Textbooks we have, and this was included in some of the background we talked about at the story of the budget, math, science, social studies, but the overall textbook budget is down where we had a bigger implementation last year. Tuition, I mentioned that special ed costs, those are still continuing to go up with that outplacement program. Technology, again, part of the story of the budget, a lot of things going on in Rod's department with the wireless access points, bandwidth increase, and the Chromebook purchase for the what's it called? Universal access. Outsourced contracts, we bid transportation this year, custodial and food service renewed, so all of the costs associated with those three major contracts are included in this budget. O&M utilities, electric we've seen some increases in electric. That's due to the transition costs, not the actual purchase of the commodity, which the board has purchased at very good rates. Natural gas was down this year. Phone costs were down this year, and water continues to go up. And if you live in one of our communities, those water bills seem to just keep going up and up and up, and we're not obviously immune to that either. But all those are taken into account as well into the overall budget. IMRF each year, IMRF fund is nearly 100% funded. It's paid for by staff members and districts contribute to it, and our overall rate is actuarially calculated each year, so that's going to go down from 11.3 to 10.9. So that's set by IMRF each year. It's preliminary right now, but usually the preliminary number holds to the time when it goes into place in January 1st. And then capital projects, I mentioned the roofing projects at Sandburg Monroe. We have the bleachers and flooring work at Warrenville South, and the work going next door, and that's all part of that transfer from fund balance to cover the cost of those projects out of our capital project fund. I'm going to go through each of the funds and just get some information about how it looks compared to prior year. Obviously, the education fund is a major fund of the school district. The revenues we receive, 84% of it is coming from local sources, 10% from state, and about 6% from federal sources. So total revenues in the ed fund are about $136.7 million, and that's about a 0.6% increase over the prior year budget. So not a lot of movement on the revenue side as far as increases go, and obviously that impact of lower CPI each year that has an impact as that numbers plays into it along with other factors. On the expenditure side, almost 117 million in salaries and benefits. It's a 0.3% increase over the prior year budget, so not pretty flat, as Dr. Schuler mentioned. Purchase services has stayed pretty flat, about 1% increase over the prior year. Supplies, it's about a 6.2% decrease, and again, that's tied in. Textbooks falls under that line item. And capital outlay is also a decrease as we start to work into leasing more of our technology and the purchasing. And then the increase on dues, fees, and tuition, obviously tuition being the biggest part of that, that's increased to that outplaced tuition costs. And so the expenditures are the same as revenues, or balanced in that fund, and overall it's a 0.6% increase over the prior year budget. This is just a pie chart that shows you where the majority of the spending comes from. Obviously, people-driven business, salary and benefits plays a big part with purchase services, coming in next, and again, food services included in this fund as well. So that's one of the larger purchase services. Moving over to the operations and maintenance side of revenue, the majority is coming from local sources, and we're still carrying that state grant money, as I mentioned. So total revenue is about 12.37 million, about a 2.38% increase over the prior year's budget. On the expenditure side, salaries again very flat, just under 1% increase in our salary and benefit line item. Purchase services, we have our custodial outsources, it's about a 2.1% increase. That's probably the major line item in there, as well as other purchase services associated with the maintenance and upkeep of our buildings. Supplies and utilities is a slight decrease over the prior year. Again, pretty flat. And then capital outlay is a larger increase as we start to put, obviously, are putting money towards the capital needs of the district, trying to knock off as much as we can. So that's an increase over the prior year. And then we have $2,500 in other fees. It was $1,000 last year, it was $2,500 this year, so it looks like a big percentage increase, but it's not a large line item. So total expenditures are again balanced as well, and it represents a 2.3% increase. This chart obviously is people laden as the ed fund, but you can see how the money is spent over the operations and maintenance fund. And again, this is the upkeep and construction and those costs associated with our buildings. On an interest side, this is the one that's going to look a little different this year. We have almost 55 million budgeted in there. If you back out the about 18 million, which is our normal operations, that other $35 million is really that it's that money in on the refi and the money out to help offset that slope. Again, Mr. Vroman mentioned that we hit the market at a good time, so we were not only able to fix some of that slope in 2018, but also 2019. There was actually, we did so much better that we were able to do that. But so this fund is inflated for this year because of that refinancing. We have a kind of a 1-year hiatus on the refinancing until we can do it again, although we may be able to do that sooner. We're still working with our financial advisors on this, but again, this number somewhat inflates the overall budget because of that refi, $35.5 million. Transportation fund, 5.1 million from local sources, 44% for about 4 million from state sources. We did include some general state aid, as the board is aware. The contract that was the bids that were put out for transportation services. All of the vendors are struggling, and with the economy being so good, it's hard to find drivers, so they're having to raise salaries to get drivers, and that's reflected in a lot of the bids that districts opened this year. So unfortunately, we had to move some of our general state aid money over into the transportation fund to help offset that increase. So it's about a 10% increase over the prior year
revenues. On the expenditure side, we have salaries, benefits, that's for coach drivers and oversight of the program, oversee the transportation program. It's a slight decrease over about 4.4% decrease over last year. Obviously, the bigger increases in the purchase services is the area where the impact of that budget and transportation is hitting. We are doing everything to try and tighten up the budgets, the routes, and working with the bus company. I've had multiple meetings trying to find ways to, as we always do, to try and minimize the routes that we have out there. And
and that's the impact we're seeing. We did come in under our budget number this year on the purchase service side, so that's why the increase isn't at the total of what the bid came in at, but so we're hopeful that we can streamline things, continue to streamline things. The one thing that is positive in the transportation fund and helped in this the overall budget is the price of gas, and I always harp on the fact that the price of gas isn't our business, but and how it impacts the CPI, but the price of gas came down considerably to where we were budgeting hundreds of thousands of dollars when it was up around $3 or $4 a gallon. I think I thought $1.95 today, so again, that's probably going to impact the CPI, but for us in transportation, it does help with our overall cost, so that number, that line item came down quite a bit. And then we have $1,500 for supplies, so overall the balance, transportation fund is balanced as well, but it's obviously a larger increase over the prior year. And you can see the majority of that cost is purchase services, which is with Illinois Central and Subtran are major providers of transportation services. Moving over to the IMRF Social Security Fund, it's all local revenues. It's about a 2.1% increase over the prior year. I mentioned the fact that we are moving some more CPPRT in there as we have moved some of the levy money around, and the fund's balanced. And again, I mentioned that there is going to be a slight decrease in preliminary number. We're still waiting to see what that final number will be, and that doesn't go into effect until halfway through the year. So we're working under the old percentage until December. Capital Projects Fund, I've talked a little bit, we've talked a little bit about the transfer of fund balance coming from the Operations and Maintenance Fund to do this work, the work that we've talked about a few times, so that the board approved that transfer tonight. That's incorporated into the budget just for the purposes when we talk about all funds. That $1.5 million isn't considered revenue, so it's just a transfer of funds, so it doesn't show up as a revenue line item in the budget and in the Capital Projects Fund. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And again, here's the projects just outlined as to what we've got going on this summer. Finally, working cash. We don't levy in this fund, but we do earn interest on the money that's sitting in there. And we have $50,000 in revenue associated with interest earnings on that. As I mentioned, the interest rates are extremely low, so we don't earn a lot of interest. It's not like days where interest rates were 5 or 6%. The district could collect $1 or $2 million and interest earnings, so it's pretty low. So then we're going to look at first at all funds, and then we're going to get down to the operating budget, which is really what everybody looks at as far as what we're doing. You can see that overall, our total revenues are about $217 million. Again, that number is increased because of that refinancing, that in and out. You'll see it on both sides of the ledger here on revenues and expenditures, but you can see overall about 88% of our budget is local, and then the other 12% is state and local. Looking at the operating funds, and again, these, as we talked about all the funds in the school district, this does not include the bond and interest fund, and it does not include our capital projects fund. This is the Ed, O&M, Trans, IMRF, and Working Cash Fund. And you can see we have about $162 million, with about 84% of that being local, 11% state, 5% federal. Expenditures, this is all funds, again, inflated number because of that $35.5 million of the refinancing. Again, about $218 million. And then on the operating side, you can see our overall budget is $162 million. 111 again does not include the bond and interest or capital projects fund. And the majority of what we do, again, is salary and benefits, almost 80%, 77% of what we do is people, so that's the majority of the budget. So all fund summary, again, I mentioned that the $1.5 million isn't counted as revenue, so the expenditure on the capital project does make it look like the budget's in deficit spending, but it's not. That capital projects fund was set up by the Illinois State Board of Ed, so you could move fund balance over and spend it on capital work. It's not included in the operating budget, so when we get to the operating budget, you'll see that we are sensibly balanced. We have about a $50,000 operating balance, which is really the interest earnings in the working cash fund. Again, does not include B&I or capital. These are the numbers the state looks at and the community looks at, obviously, closely as to what our actual cost of doing business is. As far as the overall operating budget comparison over the prior year, we're up about 1.3% over the prior year. You can see last year's budget was $160,118,560 in revenue and $160,063,560 in expenditures, which was balanced. And as I mentioned, at the end of the day, that number's going to come in positive, the actuals, and the overall budget's about a 1.3% increase. Again, it doesn't include those two other funds. With that, I went through it rather quickly. I can take questions on the budget again. The Board Finance Committee is meeting next Thursday. We will go through any budget questions we have tonight, or any, we'll probably have a discussion about the state budget. We will also go through the actuals for this year in some more detail, as we normally do at that committee meeting, and then we will bring back to the board when we have our public hearing, the actuals for this prior fiscal year again, which turned out well. Again, since 10/11, this is the 7th balanced budget in a row we've passed, with 6 of those. One's still TBD, but we feel we're going to be good. That we're going to come in a positive situation. So, other than that year we had a bad health year, the board's done a great job of getting the budget in line, especially through those turbulent 2009-10 years when a lot of things were going on, and we've stayed consistent in how we've kept our budget balanced, and at the end of the day, end of the year, had a positive impact, which impacts the fund balance, which the board passed a policy about having that range, and that's important to build that fund balance up and to use some of that fund balance when need be for capital work. So I've talked enough. I'll turn it over to the board if there's any questions tonight. Again, we're just asking you to post it, and the public hearing will occur next month after the budget's been on display for 30 days.
Just a quick question. So if we get that roughly $600,000 in our operating balance, would be 600,000 would be added. That would be added there, correct?
Yes, we've got about 6.3 in general state aid in our budget currently right now. The estimates we saw from the state were 6 million, 8 something. It wasn't close to 6.9 million. So we would be looking at increasing that revenue plan.
Yeah, just to go through a couple items. You referred to the term of balanced budget. What you really mean by that is that the revenues equal or exceed expenditures in the operating fund.
Correct.
Okay. Now, we're posting a tentative budget, so this is not a final set of numbers. And the public now has the opportunity to comment on it or attend the Finance Committee meeting to address their concerns or whatever if we decide to do that.
Correct.
The tuition number, which is what we pay for special needs, special education students that do not attend in the district. And that's a big jump, and you said, I think, $8 million?
The overall budget?
Yeah.
The overall budget's around $8 million.
And that's been increasing substantially year after year. Do we continuously evaluate whether we should bring programs because of the number of student increases in special needs or special ed? Do we continuously evaluate that to see if we should do programs in-house versus outplace?
We do, and Dr. Panopoulos could probably speak to it even better because some of that's going on right now.
Yes, we definitely do. We look internally within our organization and the systems that we have set up, and then we are currently looking for other options to kind of create our own program within house in a partnership with another district, and just looking at other opportunities. So at this point, we are exploring options to bring students back within district for the most part.
And I think, Jim, too, it's also worth noting that that does include our TCD budget for tuition, which is our vote program that we do the program up on Swift Road. So there are other tuition line items not tied to special ed, where we're seeing the larger increases in the area of special ed outplacement.
Okay, and then just to understand, there was a comment or a presentation in there that talked about compensation for teachers and benefits for teachers went up about almost 4% for this in this budget.
Yes.
And the revenue source to fund those is these primarily local taxation, which went up about 0.8%.
Mm-hmm.
So how did we, maybe in response to an earlier question that I think I heard, how are we able to balance the budget when we got a 3% differential on almost 70% of our costs?
And the core reason is obviously, I think it was mentioned, is that we did have quite a few retirees this year, so we did have larger salaries going out, and we're obviously, as we hire back and bring in newer folks, the cost is less, so that delta helped to absorb that difference that you discussed.
Okay. So in reality then, the savings or reduced salaries basically funded the increases that were either steps or contractual increases that were going to be across the board.
Correct.
Okay. What is the budget for our benefit costs? Is that approximately, you kind of combined them there, are they comparable? Are we anticipating it being increased because of our changing now to a co-op, or?
It's flatter than it has been in the past. We do have some increases built in there yet because we still don't know where we're going to land. With NIHIP, because we are having such a good year, we're having them rerun our numbers to set our rates, because again, each month has been, it's gone, we track it monthly and it's gone very well. So they were going back to look at our rates to see if the premium, they'd given us some estimates of what those costs would be, but they believe those will be going down. We don't have those numbers yet. So we do have some increase built in there overall, but it's not the normal 7% that we would see. We also have the revenue stream that's going to come in from the negotiated agreement with the spousal surcharge, which we've got some estimates on that we're using as well to offset some of that cost.
Okay, and then just to make it clear that capital funding, we increased it about $1 million. I guess in the big picture here, we have about $1 million of capital spending in the O&M fund, and we're using another 1.5 of fund balance, if you want to call it that, for the capital costs. And we've been doing some estimations here recently that were putting us at $100 million or more of capital needs within the district. So obviously, we're not funding capital needs out of current budget.
Obviously not all of them. There obviously is a longer list, but we are trying to knock off as many as we can.
Okay. And then the transportation cost, you mentioned that it's now $9 million, I think, and that there was $1 million increase. Is that fair? That was is that approximately the number? That was the one bid that we got was $1 million more, almost 12% or whatever it was.
Yeah, it was closer to 20% increase overall on the budget. We got multiple bids on the outplaced or in district special ed. We only got one on the in district regular ed and one, I believe, on the outplaced special ed. So yeah, and part of the reason why we are absorbing some benefit of the gas prices going down considerably. That line item, if you look at the fuel escalator in the budget last year, was over $300,000, I think, and now it's down to $25,000 because of the price of gas. So that helps to absorb some of that impact.
Okay, so in the transportation fund, though, the only way we can fund that extra $1 million roughly is taking out of the education fund somewhere, or some other revenue that we would have otherwise spent operationally that
Correct.
we need to do that. So the excess, or that higher state aid allocation, now goes to transportation versus education.
Correct. Yeah, I'm not a fan of doing it, but it is a flexible state source that we have moved into transportation from time to time to help absorb the costs, especially this year with the increase in the contracts.
And last item related to transportation, do we still provide any parochial school transportation? And if so, will we pass on some of these costs?
We do, but it's provided at our cost. We don't pass on costs to the parochial schools. We do transportation, I think, for St. Irene's in Warrenville and St. Michael's and Wheaton.
Say that again, we don't pass those costs on?
No.
Okay, and that's a board decision, obviously?
It was a legal decision.
Oh, we have no choice, is that what you're saying?
There was a legal matter. It was actually a little before my time, but yes, there was the result of some legal proceedings.
Okay, so obviously we don't pass the cost on?
No.
Another opportunity lost.
Any other questions of Bill? Barb?
I just have one, and just in a nutshell, because I followed, through, but I'm not sure the public will be able to discern, in a nutshell, if our CPI went up only by 0.7, and yet our budget increase is 1.3. That means that half of the money of our increase is coming from another source. Can you just kind of, in a nutshell,
Sure.
tell me where that is?
Well, some of it I mentioned that, some of the state categoricals, especially related to student tuition, has gone up. So that's an impact.
So it's a number of.
Yeah, there's also the new growth factor. We do have, I think I've mentioned in the past, we do have 2 TIFs that are coming off on this, so the new growth impact is going to be higher this year because of TIF 1 in Wheaton and TIF 1 and Carroll Stream are both ending this year, so those are captured as new growth. So even though we have the CPI of the 0.7 and the 0.8 the prior year, that new growth does have an impact of over and above that as that property comes on the tax rolls, but also that impact of that new growth in a year where 2 TIFs are ending. Not as big as Cantera or even put together, but everybody probably remembers the Cantera TIF when that ended. That was a sizable dollar amount, but this one's smaller, but it still does have an impact that that's what helps the revenue offset as well.
Thank you.
Bill,
All right, oh, Jim, go ahead.
Thank you. I've got one question on the revenue side, the performance contracting grants. You were a little hesitant about whether or not we were going to get that, or at least that's what I thought I heard. And if we, what is the amount, and if we don't get it, how are we going to offset that revenue stream?
It's $300,000, and we do, again, I work with Mr. Robbins throughout the year. We do hold some money back for emergencies and other needs, and if we feel that we're not going to get that money, we had it in the budget this year and still came in positive in the O&M fund and feel that we could absorb it again the same this year. But we are hopeful that that money will come in this year. It's a couple of years in arrears now, so. But we believe we can absorb that if we don't receive those funds.
Joanne?
Just one little positive human touch to the whole financial situation is just when it mentioned that Jim Butcher, who's a local plumber, was nice enough to donate his time to putting the irrigation system in at Warrenville South. And so just want to thank him publicly and you know, every little bit, maybe we should reach out to, we have so many wonderful local people that, you know, might be willing to help us with different little projects. But yeah, that was awfully nice of him. And he's done that before on other things too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Flooding, when this building flooded.
Just one observation, one question. I looked at the 5-year trend on the overall budget, and it's really, if you look at the big dollars and the big percentage changes, it's really in 3 areas. From what I can tell, medical insurance, which is mostly that 14 year. Tuition, which we talked about, and then transportation. Combined, those 3 are about $8 million we've had to absorb. Am I doing that?
Yes.
Okay. So, what happens if we pass this budget in September? We get to the levy in, is it November, December?
October, November.
Okay. So the levies, the budget we would be passing in September would be contingent or funded by a levy. What happens if the state issues a property tax freeze that wouldn't allow us to access any growth? Do we have to absorb that?
Yeah, we would be,
balance?
yeah, right now, I mean, the discussion's been there, it's obviously been on the plate for a while as far as discussion, and I know the governor has just recently, has talked about fair and equitable funding of schools and all, so there's a lot swirling still, even though the dust somewhat settled in Springfield, it still hasn't settled, but one of the, there's the cost shift of pensions has been mentioned, and the property tax freezes are the 2 things, and I think that the things that we look at is, I talked about the TIFs, when Barb asked the question, there hasn't been a lot of discussion about, okay, are we able to still capture new growth? Are we, we still have a bond and interest levy that's, that I'm assuming that they're going to have to allow us to levy, which is outside of our operation, but I think it's still something that we have to be concerned about because they don't allow us to levy for that. That's going to be a concern with probably our, with Moody's and Standard & Poor's and all those groups if we're not, doing that. So, again, I think that the 0.7 is, the overall, on our overall budget, that's less than $1 million, out of our levy. So, while we don't want to lose that, it's, it's something that we obviously would have to adjust for.
But our means of absorbing that if we have to, which I can't believe they would be able to get it done that quickly. But the only means to absorb it is through fund balance.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, that would
Or
be
other-
the plan. Or other adjustments. Obviously, our expenditures are salary, those folk, and benefits. So, again, I showed the percentage, it's very high, we can't make the adjustments there. I don't know what the timing, I don't know, it sounds like a lot's gonna happen possibly in the lame duck session. I don't know if it's gonna come out, or if it'd be something that come out of there, but I think there's still a lot of, I think even legislators who are, like the idea of a property tax freeze, there's still a lot of variables in there that they've got to be careful with, because if folks' property taxes go up, they're gonna have a lot of explaining to do, so.
I think there's one item, I think the contract has some wording in it that allows, if there's a catastrophic change in funding, that we have the opportunity to revisit that issue. So that, I think, is probably the biggest buffer that we have in that regard.
Yeah, we have reopeners, I believe, in for legislation like that, as well as changes to pensions.
Well, I just have a few questions. Just a point of clarification on the descriptions of the fund accounting. With respect to capital project funds, it says the revenues in this fund must be used for the acquisition or construction of major capital facilities. Those funds can also be used for major renovations and restoration, as we're doing at Whittier and Wheaton, Warrenville South, and so forth. Okay.
Generally, the capital projects fund used to be the site, it's called the site construction fund, and it was basically the driver for if you passed a referendum, you put the referendum proceeds in that fund, and then you spend it down out of that fund. This SISB changed it a few years ago, and it actually was a positive change, because a lot of districts, if you wanted to spend down your fund balance, you were then running a negative operating budget, because you didn't have the revenue, you were spending it out of the bank, but you were then, your budget would be askew in the O&M fund, because if you're doing $5 million of work, let's say, and you don't have that offsetting revenue, and you're using fund balance, then it looks like you're running a negative budget, which we actually, I think we had some of that in the mid-2000s, where we were doing some of that type of work. So it's actually considered now a sub-fund of the O&M fund, so it's, even though we did a permanent transfer, it's is kind of considered as a sub-fund.
But it's really the uses are much broader than the definition. Okay. And then just a couple line item issues. I noticed there's a decrease in the summer school tuition income or revenue from actuals in 2014-15 or 2000, of 232,000 to now we're budgeting 115,000. What, do you have any understanding why there has been that drop in?
I think that's a decrease in some of the summer school programs that we're running, summer recreation programs, and some of that funding going back to the schools for those programs in their activity accounts.
And a similar question with respect to the drop in revenues from fees from a little over 730,000 in 2014 to now it's 717,000. But I noticed there's fluctuations throughout the years. Why is that?
Just timing issues of receipt of revenues. Which line item are you on, Jim?
Let's see, is it 1,700?
17. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, that's just that ranges from 750,000. The next year was 732, 717.
Yeah.
Enrollment's going down a little bit, so we're seeing that as free and reduced goes up. So there is, there will be fluctuation in that from time to time.
And just, I noted that the actual salaries we paid in 2012-13 were about $98,600,000, and for this year's budget we're $100,445,000. So over 4 years, the amount of that we've allocated to salaries has increased 2% over those 4 years. Okay. Yeah, and the increase in the tuition payment for TCD and special ed is $7.68 million for this year. Okay. And I note that on page 7, there's the reduction in phone expense. And is that because of our movement to the Verizon contract? Telephone was 850,000.
No, the reduction last year in that is probably the leveling out of all the AT&T billing where we've had issues for the last 2 years, which is the reason we left. The biggest decrease we saw in the yearly expense last year would actually have been Sprint. Just a renegotiated contract. It wasn't anything that came to the board. It was just a different plan we went under that saved considerably. But I think actually leveraging out the bills and having them fixed with all our upgrades. If you remember, we had 2 years of, I think, refunds that they owed us, so we had an actual accurate year last year.
So the savings we anticipate from the new contract is farther out.
Yes.
And the final question, Bill, on transportation. The amount of state funds I saw in the transportation budget actually increased from last year. Is that because you have allocated some of the general fund, state funds, to the specific transportation?
Yes, that general state aid, and then on the regular ed, we had carried a number of about 200,000 last year, and it was about double that. We, at the end of the day, when they calculated, we went into a different bracket, so we actually received more money than we anticipated this year. So it's a combination of both of those.
Good. Thanks very much, Bill. Any other questions or comments with respect to Bill? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the posting of the 2016-17 tentative budget and set the public hearing on the 2016-17 budget?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Matheson,
Okay.
seconded by Mrs. Crabtree. Mrs. Hutchinson, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Matheson,
Yes.
Mrs. Crabtree,
Yes.
Mrs. Coghill,
Yes.
Mrs. Intihar,
Yes.
Mr. Gambiani,
Yes.
Mr. Paulson,
Yes.
Mr. Vroman,
Yes, the motion passes. We now move to discussion items. Dr. Schuler, the math facility master plan.
Yeah, so in your green folder, board members have an updated master facility plan project bucket sheet. I think as we talked about at the last meeting, this is going to become kind of the consistent document that as costs and projects get refined or updated, that will get tracked on this document. We did put a date on the top so that you always have a reference point when you're coming back to it in terms of the meeting that we're at. So there are 6 numbers on this chart that we're going to review today. Joe Pop-Nicholas is here to share with the board their cost estimates. You might remember at the last meeting that Joe was able to share the format around which they were going to do the cost estimating in those projects, and so he's here tonight to present the board with the updates on the numbers, which I'm going to send around to you as he gets started.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff.
It takes a minute, about 10 seconds to warm up.
How's that? There we go. Thank you, Jeff. So when I stood up here last time, we were essentially looking at an empty template and kind of our criteria of how we're going to establish a project value total for each one of our designated schools. So we're still looking at the 3 middle school sites as well as the 2 elementary in Sandburg and Washington, and then also the new ELC at the Jefferson site. So those are our 6 projects that we've created. Within each project, we've isolated independent projects as deemed applicable. On the cover sheet here, we have a recap of the 6 sites. I'd like to use Monroe as an example, so if we can go to page 9, I'll take you through what we've created and the estimated costs that we've plugged in to each one of these components. So we still have the same 10 components, which is compatible with the master plan that Perkins and Will created. Site work was not included within the master plan. I've included a placeholder of $500,000 for any miscellaneous site work that will be required as part of this improvement. And then we work our way down to FF&E. Technology I left is to be determined until we decide on what the actual needs will be. And then we move into contingencies, total construction value, and then things such as general conditions, bond insurance, CM fee, AE fee, and then on-site called inspections, geotech report, site surveying. So the whole point of this is to kind of show you what a complete project total would look like if we were to undertake a project like this.
Which school is this?
This is Monroe.
Where's the say that? Just so I- Okay.
So Monroe has various options. Schools such as Sandburg, Washington, Franklin. It's either we do all the components or none of them. whereas some of these other sites have some options built in, and I've established standalone projects if that option is available. And then the ELC is a little different animal, where that's a new facility, that's a new building. It's not tied to components necessarily. It's more on square footage, space, things of that nature.
Just to understand what you're doing, I'm looking at Monroe, and it starts on page 7, I guess. It goes through, comes to a project number at the bottom, continues on page 9.
So under Monroe, each highlighted title is its own project.
Okay.
So on Monroe, we have our first project here, which is Science and Performing Arts Project. That could be an isolated project, standalone on its own at Monroe, separate of everything else.
But on page 9, that total includes all the projects.
Correct. So there is a total, and there's an economy of scale, there's a total at each site, as though we were doing all of the components at that particular school at one time within one project.
This is Monroe. So now I look at this sheet, and I see Monroe on the bottom, and it shows 13.2, which is the same number, and then it says plus 11.5.
Yeah, so the 11.5 represents your capital needs that have been identified for Monroe. So right now you still have two numbers, right? The last step I think in the cost estimate, the last step I know in the cost estimating is to fold those two together, right? To see which of the capital projects, if addressed at the same time that you were doing any of the renovations to the facility, kind of get rolled into one project, what would be a total project cost. But I do think, again, it's going to be, I think, useful for the board as you're ultimately making decisions about what needs to get done. This gives you a way to look at a total project cost. It also gives you a way to look at isolated components within some of the projects should you make decisions to do pieces of a renovation and not others. So, I think this kind of gives you two ways. But ultimately, we want to be able to get you to one blended number should you look at it as a whole project in its entirety.
Okay. But
So right now those two are additive.
Okay. So page 9 is the 13.2.
Exactly.
And then there's another 11.5 which should be considered, is what we're saying.
Correct.
No data is on these sheets for the 11.5.
Not for that. That's in the capital projects report.
Right. And there is some overlap within the capital needs that would be covered in these projects, or subsequently vice versa.
So those are capital needs. What would you call the other issue?
Meeting these projects.
Okay, projects and capital needs.
So we have these designated projects, and then we have capital needs.
And then, as I understand, did I just turn my mic off? That's on, sorry. So as I understand it, then, if we were to do the Monroe project separately, we had $8.5 million plus $4.5 million plus $4.7 million, so that would be about $17 million. But if we did them all together, we're anticipating around $13 million.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they don't all necessarily add up because
Because
our general condition line items and things of that nature would cover subsequently all of those components at one time versus splitting them up into independent jobs.
And do we anticipate, Jeff, at the August 17th meeting, getting an understanding of where the cost efficiencies of combining the capital projects with the educational projects, what that total cost would be?
Yeah, so the hope, the expectation at the August 17th meeting is any place in this chart, the master facility chart, where you have two numbers added together, those two would get replaced by one should you choose to look at the whole thing as one project.
So just a clarification again for myself, we have the Monroe Middle School master plan has really 10 different components. So I'm on page 7. We could break that up into groupings of projects. One potential project would be the Science and Performing Arts project, which would encompass components 1, 6, 7, and 10.
Correct.
That project combined would be about $8.5 million estimated. Another one would be just the performing arts project, which is only item 1, 4.4 million.
Correct.
Another group of standalone projects would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, and 9, right?
Yes.
Combined would be about 4.7. If we did them all together, under one big project, it would be about 13.2.
That's correct.
Okay, got it. Outside the capital ones. Capital ones. And so the idea then is, as we look at the renovation components of those 10 projects, there's going to be probably some synergy and efficiencies in taking the capital needs and putting them together in the same renovation project. Maybe some overlap of costs that will allow us to hopefully take that 13.2 and reduce it. Well, it would be something between 13.2 plus 11.5 when we combine those two to bring it down.
And I would rather take it from the other side and kind of leave if the scope of work that we perform at any given school, we identify the cost estimate for that work, and that overlap would then be reduced via the capital side. Whereas there's some confusion, not confusion, but within the master plan, the way it was presented by Perkins and Will, some of those capital adjustments were made within these projects. So subsequently, they're using a less unit price per square foot, assuming some of the work is being satisfied on the capital side. Whereas this is being presented as, here's the impact per this project as a whole, not taking into consideration capital needs, which I think is a little more clean.
Just to clarify that again, so capital needs are roofs and electrical and windows and things like that, and then, so that's the, in this case, 11.5. And then when we look over here, these are then, these project-based are whether we put a performing arts addition or a locker room renovation or common area renovation, those are the other costs that are not, those are, I'll call it, new things versus maintaining the old.
I think a good example would be if this was Monroe, this room, and this was $13 million to renovate this room, I can either say it's $13 million to renovate this room, or I can tell you it's $10 million, and the reason I'm telling you it's $10 million is because $3 million worth of work in this room is part of the capital needs. So if the ceiling is identified as a condition 1 within the capital needs, I'm going to reduce this cost as part of the project because it's being satisfied over there. But I'd rather tell you that this room is $13 million and then reduce on the capital side that we don't need to do this because it's covered in the project.
And giving you a sense of your years of experience, what kind of percentage are we talking about? Because these are large numbers. I mean, we're looking at Monroe, it's 13.2, 11.5 combined. And so the question becomes, what's that overlap? What kind of percentage are we talking about? 1%, 2%, 30%? Well, because we need real numbers. So I'm just kind of curious what that percentage of overlap would be.
Between, independently now, Edison, Franklin, Monroe, Sandburg, those 4, there's a differential of $3 to $4 million.
And all projects?
Each of those independently. So for example, Edison is identified as $6,416,551.
Yep.
There could be a few $1 million, $3.1 million overlap there as far as value of capital within it.
So make sure I understand. So I'm looking at Edison, 6.4 plus 16.5. Combine those, you're looking at, $22 million. And you're saying the overlap could be 1%, 3%, 10%?
There could be $15 million in overlap potentially.
15 million?
It's going to be a very, there's going to be a wide variety per building. So one capital need might be a roof. Or one capital need might be an HVAC improvement. If it's an HVAC improvement, there could be a 30% overlap in the budget. But if it's a roof only, there's a 0% overlap. Or if it's an exterior window assembly, it could be a 0% overlap. So when we're talking mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection, fire alarm, 30-40% overlap potentially. So that's a tough question to answer right now until we dig further in with JR on that list.
And the good,
And another way to look at it too is each of these components is designated with a square footage. So after reviewing the capital needs for medium renovation, if we're in my document, I'm going to be figuring $150 a square foot to handle that medium renovation within that space at that square footage. If I know we have XYZ capital needs within that same space, I may trim that $150 a square foot down to 70. So that's double, that's half the cost that I would be representing because it's covered in the capital needs. So it is a substantial number. I believe there's substantial overlap, which we will have to identify as our next step.
In light of that, I'm just trying to, again, let's look at Edison, we just talked about. So the combined total of those two numbers is roughly $23 million. Okay. At some time, and I'm going to call that August, you mentioned this meeting in August, we're going to have that number tightened up. Okay, so how do we get, when I look at, I guess we started with Monroe, Monroe's got the Performing Arts Edition. So again, when I look at Monroe, we're looking at $25 million. So if we said for some reason we didn't want to do the performing arts, that would take a number out of it. Okay, but on the other hand, it's going to add potentially these capital improvement costs. So I guess I'm trying to just set up the philosophical approach of how we're going to be able to deal with that. So that, as we meet in August or whatever, and we start drilling down on these, it sounds like if we say we're not going to do the common area expansion, which is one of these big numbers there, the science classroom renovation, that's $1.2 million, but on the other hand, that may increase something else a lot more. So really, if we pull that out, it's not $1.2 million reduction, it would be only $500,000 reduction. So we'll have that kind of ability to make that decision, is that right? Okay.
Am I correct in guessing that where the biggest synergy is going to be found in efficiency is really Franklin, which is probably the most comprehensive kind of educational program driven set of improvements, $46.5 million. Is that a fair assumption? I'm not looking for dollars, I'm not looking for percentages, but that's what the biggest bang for our buck's going to be.
Yes.
It makes sense because the more you touch,
That's a big addition.
the more you satisfy a capital need.
Any other questions?
How many hours are going to have available on August 27th?
Well, under the Open Meetings Act, we'll have to quit at midnight. Okay, we can't go on to the next day.
Can we suspend and then go on the next 2 days?
Well, unless we post our meeting's going to last for 2 days, I'm not there yet, Jim. I'm not there yet.
Along those lines, I'm thinking maybe we should schedule 2 meetings in August. But I'm hearing Jim, and I'm hearing all the questions we're having tonight, and I'm saying to myself, August 17th is going to be a very long meeting, and I think if we're going to be fatigued at the end of this meeting, maybe we should schedule 2 meetings so that we, on the off chance that we don't get it done all at once. I would hate to be here at midnight making decisions of this magnitude. Given how we are at midnight, I would think. Especially staff. They have to get up and go to work the next day, some others don't.
So, just a clarification, there's not going to be any decisions made on August 17th. I mean, there's no action items, we'll have a discussion. But what you're saying has merit, Bob. I understand what you're getting at. I guess we can...
You have to decide that tonight. Just as we started this discussion, we had the same exact thought as Mr. Matheson about this.
Well, we have the August 17th meeting, we have the August 25 self-evaluation governance meeting. It's also the beginning of the school year where staff is really busy, so.
Yeah, we can certainly look again. I don't think that's a decision we have to make this evening. I think as I think those numbers come together as well, I think the board is going to have the opportunity to rely on some input and some work from committees as well to do some of the preparation work behind this as well. So again, at some point the obviously the finances have to come together with the opportunities you want to put in place. And so, I think at the finance committee level, of which you've got a meeting next week as well, there's got to be a key discussion around, that ultimately is going to determine what you value out of, I say value, more on the value engineering. You're going to have to then use that to make some decisions around, what are we ultimately going to cut out of the plan, and I think, so those two pieces have to come together, and I don't think all of that work is necessarily going to, have to happen, within the full board context. You have a committee structure to help with doing some of that work as well. So, but I think it's a fair point that we've got to be open to the fact that, following August the 17th, we may have to schedule some additional time to do the work.
Thank you. Yeah, one more question. I think it's a JR question. The last meeting we talked about items that are in category 1, category 2, category 3, how to most efficiently deliver those. Are those, the number under elementary capital needs and high school capital needs reflective of that analysis that JR did? Or is that still from capital?
They are reflective of the needs that JR has identified from the capital plan, but the numbers are not yet refined around the same lens. So right now in the capital plan, each of those projects is costed out as if it were a separate project. Now that we have the pot identified, you'll notice that even under those, there's an August 17th delivery around what would be the revised cost estimate if you did all of those elementary capital needs identified as a project. And I think there is going to be some shift and reduction even in that as well.
Yeah, I believe a fair amount of the conditional ones will be satisfied just as a product of doing these projects, and then it's just a matter of going back to the capital spreadsheet and then reduce and eliminate as covered within my document. So this is a good starting point to identify a good cost preliminary estimate with what we have now, and then work back through the capital side, and then trim that down accordingly to come up with an updated value.
In the same vein, I think it would be appropriate to do it now. Facility committee met to continue some conversation around early learning center and new building options for early learning center. So Brad and Jim, do you want to give that update now? Because I think it kind of factors ultimately into that placeholder that's sitting in here.
Do it?
Yeah.
Okay, so we met yesterday. Facility committee saw presentations by both Leggett Architects and Perkins & Will independently looking at what a concept could look like for a new early learning center at the Jefferson site. Two different concepts, talked about the pros and cons of that. Really didn't make any decisions about which one we liked. Maybe that's a future conversation. Did look at costs and great level of depth that's probably coming in August, but it was a good conversation. We also looked at going back to the Hubble property. Is there a way to capitalize on some of the spaces within the existing Hubble and build some portion on that site? Overall, it doesn't really work very well. We could serve about half the program. It still gets divided in other schools in the district. Leggett, who did the original Hubble, did share some design concepts and talked about some of the challenges for stormwater, parking, access and circulation, access through the middle school to get to the element, to get to the early childhood component of it. But we did look at a concept, recognizing that one of the fundamental things we're trying to accomplish wasn't able to be accomplished, which is consolidate all the early learning programs in one location.
And I think we might just add one other item, though it's not been really an active item, but we still, I believe that we're still exploring other properties as well here in the community. That's been a challenge, as we all know, but we still have someone kind of bird dogging that on the peripheral to explore other solutions, if you will, relative to existing buildings and working with landlords and maybe using that as a vehicle to bridge that, the early child center need. So I think we've got a lot of irons in the fire. We're exploring all options, and I think that's what the committee continues to do with staff.
I will point out just on there, so again, on your chart, there are two numbers in under what I guess I consider to be kind of the two active concepts still in some discussion, that being new building on the Jefferson property. There is a dollar figure in there because the concepts for both of the architects were built around the same program design. So we gave both of them the same square footage program design in terms of number of spaces, square footage for spaces. And so I think what Brad mentioned, that there may be some variance in cost just based on some design elements. For the most part, same size building, same spaces within that building. So again, as a placeholder for understanding what a new building would cost that would accommodate 16 classroom learning spaces, that's where that $16.3 million cost estimate is. And again, that was a part of the Nicholas material tonight. And then the second one is, I think, the concept that Brad talked about. We could try to put some cost estimates to work that would need to be done to try to accommodate additional early learning space at Hubble. And again, it does not accommodate the entire space, but you see the estimate there at $11.4 million for something that doesn't address the needs there. We wanted to give you that as well, costs.
So can we put the Hubble thing to bed then? Is that what we're saying? So are we saying then that we're ready to eliminate an extension to Hubble Middle School as a solution for our early learning center? Is that what we're saying? I mean, it seems to me I'm there. I don't know about everybody else, because if we continue to kind of keep that open, then that adds more work and more decision and more conversation.
In my opinion, it doesn't solve all of our problems. It creates a really difficult project, a really bad situation, not bad situation. It creates a very difficult project to do, and it does have an impact on Hubble. So for less cost, but not still a significant investment, I don't think it's really a very good solution. That's my personal opinion. We didn't have a lot of discussion about it yesterday, but maybe we didn't talk about that.
I guess I'm of the opinion, like anything, we have to explore it all. I think we're going to have some off-site meetings. We got a lot of work to do, and I think we just keep it active as an option to discuss, as we would finding another location for that particular need, along with all these other numbers that we're going to get into. So I don't think any decision has to be made on it tonight. I think all projects have to stay active, and we as a board in a work session or whatever it may be, start eliminating and prioritizing and making choices at that point in time. So while acknowledge it's not the perfect situation, I still think we just have to keep it active and keep it as a part of the whole project review. It would be my opinion.
So where would how large of the program would be able to be at Hubble, and where would the rest of the program be?
So the space program for the ideal, the needed early learning center is about 46,000, 45,000?
16 spaces.
16 spaces. We can do, by addition, 8 classrooms, 9 classrooms at Hubble. It's about 22,000 square feet, recapturing some existing space within the existing Hubble. The rest of the program is Madison, linear, just like it is now.
Okay. So we would still then be paying transportation for our teachers to be going back and forth, and all of that all has to be factored into there, rather than having it under one roof.
Right. If we want to consolidate, we can't do it without the site.
I think we've just identified a couple numbers here. I mean, we've also done that on, Madison or, Monroe, whatever. We've got things in there to break down. I don't think we have to do a lot of work to expand any more information on that, but now we have 2 numbers. So someday we're going to have to get down to the number. And if we're within $5 million, we have to reconsider that, but, or whether we're gonna add the main office reconfiguration on a building. So I think it's just a number that's available, and I don't know that we have to eliminate it right now. Any more than I want to eliminate the music offices at whatever project this is. I think, again, we have a number. That's what I wanted to see, was some comparative.
Right, and I'm glad we see
Yeah,
that.
and we have that, we're gaining that on this other thing. So I think that to make a kind of board decision that we're not going to consider that, I think we're leaning that way, but let's keep all the options open. It's my opinion.
I think we better schedule that second meeting. I've heard keep all of our options open if we're gonna need a whole lot more discussion to come to a decision,
So I'm gonna summarize, we're not gonna do any more work on that Hubble concept. We've got it out there, I'm not putting the magical strike through on it yet, but we're not gonna do any more work advancing that concept.
I think we have a reasonable estimate at this point of numbers, and it's $5 million. And we know there's a lot of deficiencies of doing it Plan A versus Plan B, but it's $5 million. So if we're at the table and we're teetering on $5 million, maybe we have to consider that, but no more than any other of the considerations we're gonna make as well. So, again, I don't see any reason to proceed further because we've kind of reached the number just like we've done over here on project costs. And so I totally agree with that statement.
Personally, I would like to have a facilities committee, when they're considering alternatives for Jefferson, focus on looking at other properties that may be available and put Hubble to the side right now. We've got a placeholder for that. Explore what other properties may be available, but the Hubble thing can be put aside for now. All right. Are we ready to move on to the next discussion item, elementary class size? Dr. Schuler?
Mrs. Dahlquist?
Sorry, I have some information that I had provided. I just want to talk through a little bit of that with you. I know that there was a lot of discussion at the last meeting about elementary class sizes. And sometimes it gets confusing about whether we're talking about a target or a cap. As you see, the numbers that are listed there are targets for our maximum class size at kindergarten and first grade is 26. And then at second and third, it's 28, and fourth and fifth, that's 30. And we look at those numbers in the spring, we continue to look at those numbers, and until class starts in the school year, we do look at those as caps. So that, for example, if at one of our smaller schools, we're looking at one of our first grade sections, they have 52 students in first grade right now, so that's 26 and 26. If one comes in, and sometimes that happens frequently, in August when they have their walk-in registration days, now that number goes to 53. We divide that into 3 sections, and now you're looking at 17 and 18 students in a class. Because when you have such a small number of classes and you divide or you add, it really makes those numbers change dramatically. So we look at that, but then once the school year starts and you have those students in that first grade classroom, and maybe it's the middle of October, November, December, and one more student comes in, then it becomes a little bit more difficult of a decision because now you have to take a third of those students from first grade and take them away from the first grade teacher that they've now fallen in love with, and have all of that and to start anew. So everybody's like, yes, create a new class size, don't pick my students. And so you get into that whole, it's really best is one more, can we provide some support? Sometimes we have other adults that are in there to help or students leave. So it's not a cap once the school year starts because it's not always in the best interest as you're talking to principals about what should happen with that group of students to automatically create a new class and have a new teacher relationship mid-year on how that goes out. So I just wanted to have a little bit of a discussion and to make sure that as we talk about those class sizes and cap and targets, we do use them as caps at some point in the year. We use them as targets later on because it has a big impact. The past practice, and many of you were around when you went through that as a board, is that we did raise that by 1 student at each grade level. That fluctuates a lot depending on what current enrollments are in the different grade levels, whether that's going to have a big impact on the budget or not. At that point, it did. I wanted to remind everybody that it's not in the teacher contract, those numbers and what that looks like is not part of that, but we do have our district leadership team that has membership from the union as well as SLT that we get together twice a year and review that and what that looks like at all those different class sizes as it plays out. And then we do talk with principals about what that looks like. I know some people have asked, well, do you look at the composition? Until the students show up, it's really difficult to know what the composition of some of those classes will be. We have new students that come in, but we do allow principals to come and talk to us about, well, I've got this issue and what this looks like. And often we look at what other supports can be given that classroom, not just what do we add another teacher to that piece. And then I included some information on our own District 200 data as Julio dices, slices, and Rangui does. We don't see any correlation between a lower class size causes higher student achievement and those things that go in with that. The research really says it's the coaching piece that you can provide. It's the reading intervention, it's the math interventions that can really cause that student achievement. And as you've seen what we've done, the district level is putting some money into that, not just lowering class sizes. And then I have some more information that I included about what would happen if we lowered class size right now by 1 across that. That's really only affects 3 classrooms across the district right now. So I know that this is mostly going to be a discussion, so I'll stop talking and entertain questions or a good time for the board to discuss.
So we heard from some parents at Madison. I think it was Madison last month. We had conversations with them. How we've been dealing with that situation there since the last meeting of this summer.
Yeah, again, I guess real clear in terms of dealing with the situation, with the message that we've given to those parents is at this point where we are in terms of point in the summer, we will add sections if the numbers come in to add a section. We're not making any special consideration just for Madison or those sections. I will tell you one of the grade levels that was of concern actually has been split. Numbers came in at the 5th grade, and so we did in fact split one of those sections. But again, we didn't do that just in response to parent concern here at the board meeting. We did it because 3 students came in and registered, and that moved them beyond the cap, and so we added that section. So I can appreciate, I think, everything that the Madison parents shared, but truth be told, there was nothing special in that circumstance that warranted any additional resource beyond the way that we've responded to every other building. We have not had any additional communication with those parents. I mean, we did talk to them that evening at the meeting, and since that time, they have not followed up additional. Yes.
Thank you for the explanation on the caps and the targets, because for the first time I feel like I really understand that number, and I think that is an issue right now in terms of how do we communicate that information with parents, because I think everybody is focused only on the cap. And I think utilizing things like your PTA council and talking to the parents there and educating is going to be a really key piece right now, because I think what happens is they see that, October, okay, my class just went over by 1, it's automatically we went over the cap, it has to be changed. And I think that is, it's the communication piece right now, I think is the key piece in helping us get through this.
And I also think they become alarmed as their class approaches that cap, because I think they worry, and sometimes that worry is driven by outside forces. They worry that, gee, there are 25 now, all we need are 2 more, and then my class is going to be overloaded. So I think, and if those 2 move in, though, before class starts, then that's an automatic trigger, am I right? I mean, it doesn't have to be by August 1st. It has to be before school starts.
Correct. Very often, I'm sitting with an elementary principal, or Dr. Rammer is sitting with an elementary principal, and it's August 12th. We're at the admin big training day, and I'm having a sidebar you need to post for a position and we need to do that piece. So right up until that point, and yes, does it get super dicey? That happens 2 days before school started and we have to figure that out. But you could reconfigure those classes much easier at that point than you can after they've had the introductory with the teacher that they're.
And I want to point out too, in the district's history, you've split sections even after the start of the school year, right? And actually that was a conversation at Madison last year as one of them moved over early in the year, and it was really the conversation with the teaching staff at the school, kind of looking at the balance of the resources that were available. I think we talk a lot about, class composition, but one of the other things that class composition also does at times is take students out of the classroom at certain core times because they're receiving services elsewhere as well, which you have to factor into that. And I think it was that combination of variables and actually truly the classroom teachers at that point that said it doesn't make sense to split. We'd be better to look at a different, resource solution. But Chris, I think good point in terms of communication. We can certainly address that with PTA Council in our regular updates with them. And truth be told, a lot of that communication is in the hands of the principals and the way they respond to that concern when it first comes up to help allay those concerns and understand, those supports that are available rather than kind of being on the defensive but our recommendation, just that this is not an action item. Tonight was a discussion item, but we certainly, from the administration perspective, we don't recommend readjusting your targets, caps at this point.
And we did have a cap and send, I think, for a couple of years in Dr. Harris's early tenure here. And I think then once we did some redistricting, I think then we didn't have the need to do that anymore. But in that case, if somebody new moved in and there was no room in that school, they were sent to another school. So that was a very tricky time for us, but I don't believe we have cap and send in a force anywhere. Okay.
My only concern, and I think Brad touched on it, was that, we had a number of parents here that night, and they were, clearly well-spoken but upset about the circumstance. And I guess if what I just heard saying that, we should, the principal, et cetera, should be handling that, I guess I'm disappointed a little bit that it got to that they had to come to the board and need to do it. So I think there was some communication gap or some understanding issue that I think is a bigger picture for me, saying that we didn't communicate to the parents at the right level, and it should have been headed off well before they, started. I don't know if there was a petition drive or whatever, but a big presence here. I think I hate to see it go that far. I think we should be more attentive.
Any other comments on Joanne?
Yeah, I had one of the teachers in my teacher group I've had. She's been there for years with my group, and she's at Madison, and she was very vocal in how difficult it was because she had one of the classes, and she just, to differentiate was impossible. So these numbers, I teach Sunday school, and if I can't even imagine having this many kids, which 4-year-olds is a little different, but still. We changed these amounts of class sizes years ago, and we haven't brought them, taken them back down again. So, do we know if other districts have the same problem or have the same numbers?
Yeah, certainly we could gather that data in terms of targets. I don't believe your class size targets are unique just to District 200. I think actually some of your comp districts, you would actually see numbers higher than what you have. Again, I think Faith did a good job of laying it out, but bottom line, if you were to lower that class size number, you're putting extra resource into class size that you no longer will have available to put in place: reading resource, math resource, coaching. I think all of the things that Joanne genuinely have a much bigger impact in terms of student learning. I recognize and I appreciate the teacher perspective and voice on it, and no doubt as a teacher, if as a classroom when I was teaching you said, well, you could give me 22 kids or give me 28 kids, pretty easy choice in terms of what I'm going to say I would prefer to have. But in terms of genuine impact, give me 28 kids with the resources around me in coaching and support and intervention, and I'm going to be far more effective with the kids. And I'm going to be having 22 kids and none of those resources around me. So I mean, that's kind of the bottom line. We saw the budget tonight. If you put more into class size, you're going to yank it out of one of those other programs. And I just,
You know, one of her complaints also was that the classroom was so tight. I mean, they could hardly, you know, even move around. So that we can't probably do anything with unless any of the other classes are bigger. Whoever, you know, moves a third, and you know what I'm saying. But
that was a unique situation, I believe, in Madison. Those classes, those grades were in the rooms that were undersized around the library there. So, very unique situation at that school that probably complicated the class size issue with the classroom size issue, making it more difficult.
Having been a former teacher, I can tell you there were years I had 30 students, and there were years I had 20 students, and some of the years I had 30 students, it was easy. They were easier classrooms, easier classes to deal with. I would rather that we put an emphasis on the fact that we listen to our principals, and if there are multiple needs that need to be addressed, that we have some flexibility there in that number, and we don't just focus on, if we hit this number, we automatically do this. I would hope that if we were approaching that number and we had a group that had a lot of needs, that we were actually looking at that versus just the number.
Moving on.
That's what we do.
Moving on to,
That's correct. Yeah.
Are there any more comments? Or moving on to written reports. We all have the monthly financial reports. We've seen the FOIA requests and the update on expanding learning opportunities. The update on expanding learning opportunities, ELO. Reports from board members. We've already heard from the Facilities Committee report. Anything to add there? Any other committee report?
Oh, I have a question. I just want to make sure that us as a district and the two individual schools, south and north, are really promoting to the students and the parents these opportunities. And I've talked to lots of friends. My own daughter's experience. If it wasn't for me, she would say, making her take a class. You know, she wouldn't have known about it. So I just want to make sure that we're working with ELO. We're working within our individual schools to make students and parents aware that we have this opportunity, because our numbers, while they're going up, I believe, you know, in comparison to our other two partners, are going down. They're still low, in my opinion, from what we kind of initially envisioned as a board. This, what I would say, is a wonderful opportunity for our students.
We also think that
there's room for improvement in trying to get the word out in the communication piece. You know, we have had information and information nights and those kind of things, but obviously it's not super effective, because if you talk to people, they're still like, I don't know that much about this. I've just been working with Kip Pigman, who's the director of ELO, and we've been meeting. He has a meeting with our assistant principals at both of the high schools on Monday, and we've drawn out more of a detail of what would this be, and having more face time with Kip in the district to be able to talk about this. We went over and talked with 204 about, what are you doing? You got so many students. Part of that is that they had had numerous online courses for a long time, so people were used to the idea of taking an online course. But some of their magic also is they had some teachers that got really excited about this and went door to door during registration time and had some of that piece. So we're hoping to copy some of that, of what that looks like. And then we have some meetings with the department chairs, because there's still some apprehension from some of the teachers of what does this look like. So we did more work with the counselors this year, and I think that's paying off. But we still have additional work to do, but we have a written plan that's being shared on how that's going to happen.
Quick question, what would be an incentive for a student to take, I understand my daughter did ELO 2 years ago, so during summer, but what would be the incentive for a student to take one of the courses that we offer for ELO during the school year. Because I noticed District 204 had quite a large number that takes during the school year. I could see if it, I'm going to use consumer ed as an example. Why would you take it online during the school year when you have that opportunity to have it with the teacher? I could see if we were offering something that we didn't offer within a classroom during the school year, maybe it would be more popular. I'm just curious what would be the...
Sure, we did design some courses that aren't in the face-to-face options and put that out there. There just wasn't enough interest between the 3 districts to run some of those classes. Some of the students that are currently in the ELO courses that could be offered face-to-face talk about, well, I can work at my own pace. If I want to spend, Tuesdays and Thursdays, some of our students take that as a placeholder, so it could be a study hall a few days a week where they work on things that just happened, or we'll do that, and then they choose to do consumer ed ELO in the evenings on their own and be able to do that. Some of our students take it as a course overload, so that I can get a couple of these things underway. Some of our students, not as many of ours, but some of the students from 204 talk about how they have some anxiety and things about school, and being able to participate in a class like that and be able to type it out or be at home and still have some downtime during the school day allows for some flexibility of the stamina that you might need to do to get through a school day. And then there are a lot of students and parents that have said, hey, this is a really great thing that we want to have some exposure to before we go to college, of taking an online course, because a lot of the colleges are doing online courses as some of the options. Some students really don't like class participation and talk out in front of everybody, and now they can talk with people and still have that discussion and chat back and forth, but not I have to speak it. I can text it and write it. So there are some reasons that a student would take a class online through ELO, even if it's available on course. Or is it some of our students had a conflict, like if they had to get that other elective in, that just the second period, there's no other thing. So I'm going to take it as an option outside so that I can get into that music elective that I really wanted to have that's only available at that particular time.
So the question maybe doesn't answer tonight, but the projections are not close, right, to what we approved, 2-3 years ago? Has that been when it started? And so as a staff, when do we pull the plug on ELO if it really is becoming a cost situation as opposed to a benefit to the students? I mean, has that been thought about yet, or is there any plan?
Truly, Jim, I think if we hadn't seen the growth trajectory that we saw this year, and I think some of the planning around that, I think that would have been a viable conversation. We're actually approaching the point where I think just on a cost perspective, it's okay. I mean, you're not paying an exorbitantly high expense, especially when you factor in what you're getting during the school year and the expanded opportunities in the summer that ELO provides. But I guess what I would say to you as a board is if for whatever reason we saw that trajectory shift back around or become stagnant again, I think that'd be a viable point of conversation, at least better understand why. Or I think as we even had some conversation, I think, Brad, to your point, there's a fine line between making sure that kids and families are aware of that opportunity and the potential benefit of that opportunity, but also understanding that's one of many choices, both within the high school and some other programs outside the high school, with TCD and all of those. So I think we've really tried to be cognizant of the fact that when we want kids to be aware of the opportunity, we want kids and families to pick it if it makes sense for them. We don't, I don't think that the goal is necessarily to say, gosh, this opportunity would be better than TCD for every kid, or better than, the AP classes that we've grown, in size and number. So,
I'd be curious, we're seeing these enrollment numbers. How many students complete the program? I know there's been some concern at the junior college level and so on, that there's a lot of enrollees in online courses that never complete. And
Do students, can they drop out of this midterm, or, I mean, once they sign up, or no, they cannot?
No, once they sign up, they're in the course, so if they, get any other course, I mean, they could stop working and get a very bad grade, but they can't drop the class.
Moving on to written reports. Moving on from written reports from board members. Any further report from the facilities committee? Any other committee reports? Just a quick report from the president here. In July, we're to initiate the goal setting process. And what I'd like to have each board member do, and I would think by the end of the month, Jeff, would that be appropriate, is to submit by email or conversation and email to Jeff your priorities under the 2018 vision plan that we have that was set by our community engagement process a couple of years ago. And I invite you to review the work plans for the goals that we had this past year and the year before, get some idea. And also to look at the board parking lot. A copy is in your folder. To see if any of those items on the parking lot are a priority that you'd like to see incorporated into a goal for the 2016-17 school year. Or are there items on the parking lot, and I think there are, things that can be removed either because they've been accomplished or are perhaps no longer relevant. If you identify such items on the parking lot, also put that in your email. I'd like to see item 5 or whatever item it is removed from the parking lot because it's accomplished or it's no longer relevant to me. And from what I understand, if there's some consensus on the goals, the priorities, or what should remain in the parking lot or what may be added to the parking lot, Jeff will assemble those and we'll begin to review those and hopefully come to some conclusion at our board governance self-evaluation meeting on August 25. I had thought about maybe doing that on August 17, but after hearing the facilities committee report, I don't think that's going to be an option. But I do want to focus on that so we can get some goals in place for 2016-17. In doing that, make sure they're consistent with our Vision 2018 vision, and also include a reference or consideration of what's on the parking lot and how we can amend that as well.
This is the last time, I thought we updated this parking lot. Is this the 2013-14? You couldn't find a later copy? Okay.
I did not see a more recent copy. I think we looked at the parking lot at one point right after it started, but I don't think we actually added or amended items.
I know we changed the goal setting process when you set the, when we set the goals with you. But I bet you we didn't look at the
Yeah.
What is the process for adding to the parking lot? I'm just going to throw out like final examinations. We wanted to, as a board, look at finals. How do we go about doing this? Is that through the teaching and learning committee? How do we go about doing that?
You look at the page attached to the parking lot.
There's
a process.
All right.
One other thing, just.
This is 9/16/2015. There has to be a later copy, because if we updated this.
I do not believe that we updated the actual parking lot itself. I have not, Barb, I have not seen a more recent copy. We reviewed this, I think, at the very first governance session that I was at right after they started, but I don't believe we've updated the actual parking lot itself.
I clearly remember not talking about school uniforms more than once.
And please complete, you've all been notified by the email from Diana about the ISP survey. Please complete that so that Barb, Tony will. No, I can't remember right now. So Barb, Tony can calculate the results and compare them from 2 years ago.
I didn't see an attachment on that email.
There's a link.
It's a link.
It's a link.
Is that an email? Can you send that to me, please? Let me delete it.
Anybody that's not filed, could you resend to where they may be? Anybody talking to you now?
Thank you.
And one, just final report, I know that
You don't need to resend it to me, I didn't buy it.
Chris attended the 4th of July celebration at Johnson. Actually, it was held on June 30th. Jefferson, I'm sorry, at Jefferson. I attended it at Bauer. It was a wonderful ceremony. Our IUP students put on a good show, both at Bauer and I take it at Jefferson.
Yeah, Jefferson was great.
And it was fun to watch. And my admiration for our special ed staff grew tremendously just seeing that.
Jim, I'm sorry, I want to come back to discussion of the parking lot. Just one other thing I wanted to mention is that with the Citizens Advisory Committee, I do think as the board, as you're thinking about goals, that gives you one other avenue to consider, meaning that the Citizens Advisory Committee asked at the end of the year that if there are topics that the board has an interest in them spending time studying from a Citizens Committee perspective, they certainly would welcome
School uniforms.
I guess I want to give you another option besides it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a board goal, but if there are items on the parking lot that you think, a review by the Citizens Advisory Committee with some structured feedback from that group, back to the board, that's another option as well as you kind of review those documents. So.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I forgot about that element there. Topics for future discussion, of course, the facility master plan and the 2016-17 budget. We do have our board governance workshop on August 25. If you can at 5 p.m. here at the SFC. Our next regular meeting is on August 17 at 7:30 p.m. here at the SFC. Are there any public comments on non-agenda items? Seeing none, I ask for a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Engelhardt.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Crabtree. I can ask for a voice vote. That's right. Thanks for saying that. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. We are hereby adjourned.
Read about online.